Welcome to Blooming Wildwood Homestead and today's episode of Homestead Coffee Talk. Today we're going to be discussing homesteading skills that you need to learn in order to have success on the homestead. Thank you for joining me today. Today's conversation, we are really talking all about homesteading skills. So grab that coffee, tea, water, whatever it is that you are drinking this morning, and let's dive into today's conversation. One of the things that I've been discussing with my family in the last few months is the idea of whether or not it's better to really master one skill and be just really honed in on that one thing, or whether it's better to be able to do a wide variety of things, and maybe you haven't mastered it all the way, but you're able to do a wide variety of things fairly decently, fairly well, and you're continuing to grow in all of those areas. Sometimes it can be really frustrating because we feel like we want to really just dive into one particular thing and really become a master at that one particular thing. But depending on how many people you have homesteading with you, it really is something that you have to consider. If you don't have very many people working with you, you might have to develop a wide variety of skills in order to have any type of success on the homestead. If you have many people that you're working with and that are there on the homestead, maybe you can have people be a little bit more specific in the areas that they have mastered. But let me know down below, what are your thoughts on this? Should you really hone in and master one thing only? Or should you have a wide variety of skills that you're able to do with some level of proficiency? The list that I'm going to share with you today is not an all-encompassing list. This list is based off of things that I have learned over the course of the last few years that has been really helpful to me, things that I'm in the process of learning that I think are going to be helpful to me, or things that I see as really an area of opportunity where I could grow, and some skills that I need to continue to develop moving forward if I really truly want to see success here on the homestead. These skills are things that you can start to learn and build throughout the years. So if you're brand new to homesteading, these are things that you might be getting started with and you might be working with, or if you're planning to move to a homestead maybe in the next 2 to 5 years, these are things that you could even start working on now in preparation for your move out to the homestead. The more that you can work on now, the better it's going to be once you get out there, because you're going to feel like you at least have something to pull from as far as your skill level goes when you're trying to get started. The first homesteading skill that I think is extremely important would be gardening. This is something that if you're trying to build a self-sustainable lifestyle and you want to be self-sufficient, you want to be able to grow your own food, and gardening is an essential skill in that area. Within the context of gardening, we know that there are a lot of sub-skills that you have to learn along the way in order to find success. It's not just throw a seed out in the middle of the ground and hope that it's going to come up at some point, which is sometimes the attitude that people approach gardening with. If you really want to find success and you really want to have the production level that you need in order to be self-sustainable, or self-sufficient, you need to be honing those skills. You need to be able to know how to keep your plants healthy, how to troubleshoot if there's an issue, how to get your seeds started and be able to maintain them throughout that transplanting phase. There are just so many different parts to gardening and being able to grow your own food successfully. That is the first homesteading skill that I think you should learn. Moving along that same line, the second homesteading skill that I think you should learn is how to preserve your own food. Learning how to can, freeze, dehydrate, how to take all of that excess food and be able to store it away for winter is going to be essential, again, in trying to help you maintain that self-sufficient lifestyle. So learning different techniques for canning, being able to learn what kinds of foods you prefer to dehydrate versus freeze. All of those skills are things that you can begin to grow in and begin to learn at whatever phase that you are in. If you don't have your own produce or your own canning equipment, maybe see if you can find a friend who is going to be doing some canning and volunteer to go and help them. That's a great way to get some hands-on experience and learn from someone who's doing it and gain some of those skills in this season of waiting maybe for your own homestead or waiting to get started yourself. The third homesteading skill I think you should learn is how to ferment foods. Fermentation is a form of preservation, and so I guess you could kind of lump it into that food preservation skill itself, but I think that there are a lot of little nuanced things that come with fermentation, and so therefore it kind of warrants its own category. This is something that I've just started getting into a little bit more last year. I started doing more work with that, and it's definitely a skill that I want to continue to develop moving forward. The fourth skill, that homesteading skill that I think you should learn, is how to cook from scratch. One of the things that is different when you live in the city, it's very easy to be able to just go to a fast food restaurant, or maybe you're feeling like you've changed your mind on what it is that you want to have for dinner, so you just swing by the grocery store and grab something different and you're able to prepare that food or whatnot. When you're living on the homestead, chances are you're living away from the city just a little bit, and that type of convenience food is not as readily accessible, which can be a really good thing. But you do want to make sure that you've got some skills to be able to cook from scratch. Know how to read a recipe. Maybe if you're a super adventurous person, you could just make up your own recipe and have some fun in the kitchen exploring how to cook meals from scratch. Along those same lines, I would say being the fifth homesteading skill that you should learn is learning about the basics. When I'm talking about the basics, I'm talking about what are some basic staples that you should have around the house. So if you're going to cook from scratch or be doing things, you've got to have some basic items in the pantry: flour, sugar. They're just some basic, what we would call staples, that you should have available and at the ready. Also with that, along that same line, there are just some basic materials that you should have around the homestead, because you never know when you're gonna need it. Like some scrap wood or different hardware that you might need for something, or it's just a wide variety of things that could kind of be encompassed into this idea of the basics. But I think that you should learn about those things that you just need to have on hand, or you need to have readily accessible at all times. Because again, when you're living on the homestead, things are moving quickly, you're busy with different projects, or different things might come up, and you don't have the time to be able to just run to the store and grab something and take care of the situation. You need to have some things on hand in order to be able to take care of that or cook that item or whatever the case might be. And so there are just some things that it's a good idea to have on hand. The sixth homesteading skill that I think you should learn is how to do baking. Again, there's nothing that says that you can't go to the grocery store and get things. I'm not saying that. I go to the grocery store and buy things. Sometimes I buy bread, you know, other things. But there is something very homey and special about learning how to do that baking and how to make things yourself. Learn how to make bread from scratch. Learn how to use a sourdough starter and keep it alive. That's very important. And learn what you can do with it and different things that you can make with it. Those kinds of skills are going to serve you really well into the future. If you end up with, maybe there's a snowstorm, you live in an area where you get a lot of snow, you're not going to be getting out and going to the store to just pick up your bread. you want to know how to make that at home. And again, not to say that you're going to do that every single time, but you should know how to do that skill. And so baking is an area I would recommend learning how to do. The 7th homesteading skill that I think you should learn is sewing. There are some basic sewing skills that I think everyone universally should know how to do. You should know how to patch up clothing if you end up needing to do that. That's just a basic sewing skill that you want to be able to know how to do. And if you want to take that kind of a step further, just some basic sewing skills in order to be able to maybe make curtains. That's something that I recently worked on for the house so that I could keep more of the heat in on cold winter nights. So it was nice to be able to go ahead and put that sewing skill to use. Maybe you want to make home decor items, and it would be nice to know how to sew that and be able to do that. Just a basic understanding of sewing and how to do that can be really helpful in a variety of ways around the homestead. And kind of along with that, it's not really sewing, but also knitting or crocheting could kind of go along with that. I've been able to knit some dishcloths, and they last a lot longer than anything that you could buy, and they work better. And so while that's not sewing itself, it kind of goes along that idea of making things, and it definitely is something that is handy around the homestead. The 8th homesteading skill that I have on this list is animal husbandry. And again, like gardening, this really encompasses a lot of little nuanced skills within that, depending on what type of animals you have around the farm. So if you have chickens, how you take care of your chickens and what you're going to do with your chickens is going to be very different than if you have goats or pigs or cows. And so learning that particular species of animal and how you can take care of that animal to the best of your ability, those are all skills that you will need to learn. If you have not moved to the homestead yet and you want to get into to raising animals, and you know that's an area that you want to work on, this is a great time to go ahead and start reading up on animals and how to take care of them. And while that's not the same as the hands-on practical experience, it will at least help you start to build your knowledge base so that when you have the animals on the farm, you're going to have something to draw from or reference materials that you can go back to and be able to help problem solve as you get those animals on the farm. The 9th and 10th areas that we're going to talk about today are areas that I have for growth. They are definitely areas of opportunity, areas that I need to be growing in. And so I'm putting these on here as a help to you, but also a reminder to myself of the things that I still need to work on. So number 9 is learn how to use small tools and knives. Anyone who knows me knows that I don't have the best track record with tools involving cutting or things of that nature. So people generally get nervous if I start using a saw or using a really sharp knife. And so these are skills that I am working on building because I am not the most graceful person when it comes to these areas. And I know that they are areas of opportunity for me. But you need to know how to use small tools. Maybe you're gonna put together a raised bed and you wanna be able to trim your lumber to the size that it needs to be, and you need to be able to assemble that raised bed together. Learn how to use the tools that you will need to accomplish that project. And along with knives, one of the things that I have learned is that it's really handy to have a pocket knife that you carry around with you out in the garden. You never know when you'll need to use it for something. And also, when it comes to in the house and cooking, having a good sharp set of knives for cooking is also really, really important. And if you're going to have knives, you need to learn how to sharpen those knives so that they will last you for a really long time in the future. And that really is a skill that needs to be learned. And the 10th area, or the 10th homesteading skill, area of opportunity for myself, has to do with firewood and using a chainsaw. Once I moved out to the homestead, now I have wood heat, and this is definitely an area of opportunity for me. I didn't need to use a chainsaw in town. It wasn't something I had need of, and I had gas heat in town, so I didn't have to worry about getting in firewood or anything like that. And so that is a skill that I am hoping to learn how to do. Now, I know, as I said, this list is not all encompassing. These are just a few of the skills that I have noticed I really use around the homestead, or I know that I need to work on because they would be really helpful for me moving forward in my homesteading journey. And so I hope that this can be a help to you, maybe give you some ideas of areas that you could start to work on growing and developing your skills in as well. And let me know in the comments, what are some other skills, if you're currently living on a homestead, what are some skills that you have been developing or that you've learned that you really think are helpful to you and that more people should work on and look into. If you had value from today's video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I can't wait to see you back here next time. Bye everyone.